Welcome to Early Autism Project, EAP as we call it here. Often when families join this program, they also have to work through a number of internal issues in the family. Loss and grief are a reality in your home, and you do have to understand and find healthy processes to work through it. I hope this video presentation will help you and your spouse and your family to work through the whole situation of grief. Grief is the response to the loss of any significant person or a significant dream that we have had in our life. The process of grief and shock follows such losses in death, in broken relationships, and in our particular situation, when we find out that one of our children are struggling with autism, and how significantly that's going to change our life, our family dynamics, our relationships, our goals and dreams for our lovely child. Now remember, life is a blending of loss and gain, a celebration of life, but also the grieving of loss. It is common. We all go through grief in one source or the other. But we must learn how to use our losses to build new strategies, new relationships, and new opportunities for growth if we're going to carry these challenges well and in a healthy way, so that everyone in the family, mom and dad, brothers and sisters, and extended family all can do well in this very difficult time. But for the lack of insight, many can deal with this grief, this loss, this shock badly. And instead of coming to terms and finding these opportunities, we can choose to continue in denial. We can come up with processes of delaying rather than coming up with structures as quickly as possible. Or we can distort the reality and choose to believe something that is false. Each of us handles grief in a very personal and individual way. This is why you will find it hard to relate and to understand how your spouse is grieving, how the other children in the family are grieving. The grief process can be very isolating. Father and mother may handle grief in very, very different ways. Husband and wife, you can deal with the grief of knowing your child is struggling with autism in very different ways. Dad may have explosions of anger and frustration. That's him handling the grief. Mom, you may get so upset with him because he's handling it in such a hostile way or an aggressive way. On the other hand, a mother, a woman, may handle her grief by being very depressed. And dad, you may be so frustrated with her because this is for you not the time to be depressed, but the time to make decisions. What you are facing is that both of you are handling grief in very different ways. Don't let it isolate you. If you can understand the stages of grief, you can actually strengthen each other. You can help each other. You can go through this difficult time and establish processes that are going to be very healthy for you and your family and your child that is struggling with autism. So let's begin by talking of the stages of grief. I'll tell it to you in a brief process. If any of the stages relates to you and you want to know more, you may have to seek counseling to work through these stages. Now, the stages are normally spontaneous. You move from one stage to the other. You don't intend to, but that's how your emotions, your mind is handling the shock and the grief. Over the course of time, you will go through all these stages. Recognize it, acknowledge it, talk to it to one another, and cope with it and help each other cope with it. Sometimes there can be blockages to this process, interruptions, delaying. Now help each other. This is where it is so important for you as a family to hold together, to talk about it, and to work through the process. Normally, the first stage of grief is the shock. When you come to the reality and the realization that your child is now having tremendous challenges because of autism, you're going to just struggle with the shock. Very often, itself will be manifest by just this numbness in your emotions, or violent expressions of intense feelings. And this can completely distort the perceptions you have about what is the best way to help your child through autism. Be aware of this. The shock can bring out some very unpleasant behavior and reactions. Give yourself an opportunity to work through the seasons of shock. And very fast on the heels of shock will come a denial process. It's just a protective device that is within us. We want to protect ourselves from the pain and the shock. And we try to dilute the reality while we try to master our emotional forces, because we have to cope with the reality of a child that is now struggling with autism. So our emotions does that. It helps us go through a place where we don't want to face, we don't want to meet up with a consultant, we don't want to think of new strategies and new relationships that we must have, and we want to delay that process. We want to try to get ourselves busy with something else. They are denial process. That is how you are now coping because of the shock of the whole thing. Now you can struggle with anger, which is the next process. This whole thing with anger, you begin to associate with resentment, sometimes even bitterness. The sense of injustice. How could this happen to my child? What did I do that was wrong? I don't deserve this. How could this happen to us? Sometimes you may try to find someone to blame. You may blame each other, mom and dad. You may blame your spouse. You may blame and feel so guilty because of something you've done, and you said, oh, now God is punishing me through my child because I did the wrong thing. Really, it's got nothing to do with that. It's your emotions going through a grief process to handle the reality and challenges that your child is going through. Anger does help us separate from the loss. It does help us work through and take it to another place. Remember, it's okay to be angry, but do not let your anger become violent towards the other members of your family, because you're now going to disrupt the support system you will need to help you through the challenges. You need family, you need your marriage, you need extended family. Now you may even come to a situation where you will try to bargain with God and say, God, I would do this with you if you would only heal my child. Even such thoughts, behavior, prayer is part of the natural process of dealing with grief and shock of this very difficult situation your family is going through. To some extent, parents and family can go through some mild form of depression. There can be some withdrawal, some shutting down, some need to just sleep and not break through the situation. Again, that is part of the journey you're going through. It helps you in this season where you separate, where you shut down. It helps you to explore, to contemplate the full impact of the loss of a dream, of a hope that you have for your child. Remember, every parent has tremendous dreams and hope for their children. That's what parents do. And now, because of the situation, you're struggling. You're seeing this dream and this hope come crushing down. And it's going to be painful. Depression is when you are facing the reality of that pain. When you're beginning to recognize and face it, but the memory is going to be there. The loss is manifest in a yearning, a psychological pain that is deep within your soul, your spirit in some dimension. It is so real, it is almost a physical pain. Then comes the mourning for yourself, the guilt, the remorse, the loneliness, the fear of the future. And this can bring physical distress, sleeplessness, a loss of appetite. In this time, you need others. Do not isolate yourself. You need to find counselors. You need to talk to the consultants and the therapists to help you work through this stage as a family. Slowly but surely will come the moment where, as mom and dad and other members of the family, you will learn to accept the reality of what your child is going through. Here you are ready to refocus, to explore the options, the opportunities, the new energy and strength that you're going to find, which you will surely have to help your child work through their challenges. You will find new relationships, people that can sit and talk to you and give you tremendous strategies here in EAP. Your consultants will talk and help you with this process. They will be fully aware of the grief you are going through. The therapist will come and work with your child, knowing very well this is a grieving process. This is difficult for you. So get ready. The day will come where we must talk about new strengths. We must talk of how you have to develop new relationships and new patterns of life to begin. We'll talk more about that in a moment as we go into these areas.